Well, I hope everybody has had a good break, and I did get the papers graded and the grades posted and the papers posted. So I got the grades posted yesterday and I got the papers posted this morning. Have y'all seen your grades? So it was good. Everybody did well. Let's see, I was just looking to see. The grades in this class ranged from 85 to 99. So that's really good. It always makes me happy when nobody gets a terrible grade. So you all did great. And I know that, who likes writing stories better than writing reports? Which one of y'all? Okay. Well, y'all are going to be happy. And if you're not happy, I think you'll enjoy this story writing better than you probably have enjoyed story writing in the past. I never liked story writing when I was in school because I really couldn't think of any stories. Has anybody ever had that problem before? Where you just can't think of a good story to write? Well, I had that problem. But then when I saw how IEW teaches you to write a story, it totally solves that problem. So even I can write a story the IEW way. So I hope that you're going to enjoy it. And good morning, Layla and Zoe, and who else came in while I was talking? Okay, so do you go and look at the website and look at your grades and look at my comments? One thing that we aren't going to have to do again this year is works cited. Yay! I think that's everyone's least favorite thing. Did anybody actually enjoy doing the works cited page? Really? Zoe, what did you like about it? And Levi, what did y'all like about that?
I just thought that it was easy and it was kind of fun just to input it to the website and just let it do its thing. I don't know.
Well, you know, CiteFast does really make that easy. So a few people had trouble with their formatting on their works cited page, and I'm not really sure why. Oh, that reminds me. Where is Asia? Is she coming today?
Yeah, she's coming. I don't know where she is right now.
Okay. So if you use CiteFast, you really shouldn't have trouble formatting the paper if you download it as a Word document as one of the choices. It ought to turn out correctly every time. So I would always suggest that you use CiteFast. There are so many details with works cited pages that it's hard for people to keep them in their heads. I even forgot about a particular thing when I was doing all my grading. All the classes had research papers. And I forgot that the website was supposed to be italicized. And so I started seeing all these things on people's pages where websites were italicized. And I was like, that's not right. And then I opened my book and looked at it, and lo and behold. Hey, Carson, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you doing?
Great. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well.
Even I forget things about MLA and especially about works cited. So you should never, ever trust your memory and try to format it yourself. You should always use a tool. Now, of course, there are pitfalls to avoid because they don't always bring up all the information, or some of the information might not be right. So you do have to have a basic understanding of how things have to be formatted. But it's really helpful to have that tool. Carson, I was saying about how everybody had done really well with their papers. So I was so happy. There's nothing more depressing to me than a paper that's just terrible.
Yes.
I can't stand it. I know people think English teachers love to go romping through people's papers, marking out stuff and writing in red and all that kind of stuff. Not me. I want everybody to get 100.
Yes, ma'am.
So Anyway, I was very happy with the papers. I may be using some of them in the handbook for next
Yes.
year. So, okay, there's Asia.
Oh, Miss Kimbrell.
Yes.
In 2 minutes, classes are going to be out, so am I allowed to go on mute for just about 5 minutes or so?
Okay, well, just do that whenever you need to, Carson.
Yes,
I trust you.
Thank you.
Okay. Oh, hey, Asia.
Hello.
Good to see you. So, don't neglect to look over my comments, because even though we're not having to do another works cited page this year, most everything else still applies, especially the style stuff. Now, structure is completely different when we're talking about stories, which we're going to cover in just a few minutes. So the way you put a story together is not the same way that you put a report together. For instance, what do we have at the beginning and end of every body paragraph in a report?
A period.
Well, yeah. But I was thinking of something a little more significant than that. Anybody know? What is every
Introduction
body?
and conclusion.
Well, that's at the beginning of a report, yes, and at the end of a report. So that's one different thing. A story kind of has a sort of introduction, and it has something that we do call a conclusion, but they're nothing like what we just did. And then we have the body, and the body paragraphs all start with a particular thing, and then they end with a particular thing. Does anybody remember what that is? Topic sentence and a clincher sentence. There are no topic clinchers in stories. So it's a completely different way of thinking about writing. So some of you will probably just love that. And some of you will probably be nervous that you have to think up a story, but it's going to be fine and you will like it. Who's done stories with IEW before? Has anybody in this class ever done IEW stories? Okay, Connor, Levi, sort of, Grayson. Yeah, we've talked a lot in Prep 1 about stories. So I know this is going to be very familiar to you, Grayson. So anyway, that's what we're going to do. We are going to learn a new style element that you will be using in your stories. And I wait until we get to stories to introduce this, because it's much easier to do it in a story than it is when you're writing nonfiction, although it's important in nonfiction too, and that's called descriptive writing, but we'll talk about that today before we finish. So is there anybody who has looked at their papers, return paper, and your grades? Levi, did you see your paper? Okay. Anybody have any questions before we move on to writing fiction and writing about fiction? That's what we do in second semester. And we say that's for last because that's writing from pictures, which everybody loves. And people always want to know, when do we get to do writing from pictures? It's not until assignment 13. So there are many miles to go before we get to do that. And it's fun. Okay, no questions about reports that we need to discuss before we move on? No? Okay, Jackson.
For the grades, because I looked and I only see one, so would that be all my other, do you take away the previous grades?
Mm-mm.
I only saw one.
Oh, let's talk about this because this causes a problem sometime. Asia, did you have a question?
Yeah, so I got like an iPad to do my school on, and when I save my stuff into on here as a final or whatever, that's when it starts, and it's not like what I save it as, and that's when it comes up as like a bunch of random
Yeah, I think that probably had something to do with you having trouble with your formatting for your works cited page.
Yeah, that was another thing. Like, it kept, whenever I was saving it, it would like save differently.
Well, you might need to email that to somebody and save it on their computer. Okay, because if you do that in college, you just get a 0.
Okay.
So you've got to learn a strategy for taking care of that. Okay.
Okay. Mm.
So I want a Word document and I want a PDF, and I don't.
Yeah.
It needs to be just a straight thing because you'll start having trouble with formatting and all kinds of stuff. And college professors don't care. They've got so many students. And if you aren't going to do it the way they tell you to do it, then they just give you a 0 because they just get very frustrated and they have too much to do already.
Mhm.
So this is a great thing about my class because as aggravating as all this stuff is, you're learning how to do it now. So those are big things that you won't have to learn to do when you get to college, you know? So it's okay. I'm sure this can be worked out, but we do have to work it out, okay? All right. Good for you getting an iPad. That's wonderful. It seems like those things would be really handy. I don't have one. I just have my computer and my phone. So let's see. I don't know if I even have skills to use an iPad. I don't understand Apple products. They're very mysterious to me. Okay. So I should probably get one just because of that. Oh yeah, I do want to show you this because this will be confusing to a lot of you. And it took me a while to figure out what is going on here. So let me just show you this. I'll show you this with another class. So if you can open up Thinkwave so you can do this on your computer right now. Okay. Let me do share screen. Now, some of you might not be able to open up your computer right this minute. Let's see. Hold on just a minute. All right. First of all, I have to show you my babies. I had 3 new grandsons last year, and I'm so proud. So these are my babies. I got them all matching outfits for Christmas. That's Wesley. He was born in February. That's Ryder. He was born in November. And that's Corin. He was born in June. So, I wanted them all to have matching little cute outfits. That's Ryder. He couldn't sit up, but the children were very interested in him. They were kind of poking him. One of them almost stuck his finger in his eye. So anyway, isn't that fun? I just love that. All right, so I wanted to show you this though, because let me find this here. Okay, so this is one of the mysteries of Thinkwave, okay? We're now in 2nd semester. So in order to look at the assignments for this semester, let me see, let me go to Jude's page. Hold on a minute. I'm using somebody else's class, so if I go to Jude's student, hold on a minute. Visit student account. Okay. So if I go to Jude's page here, you can click on assignments. Or is this where you were clicking? Who asked me that? Was that Jack? What did you click on? What did you click on to look at your grades? Is that what you clicked on?
Yes, ma'am.
You clicked on grades. Is that right? Okay, this is your grade for the entire semester, all right? If you want to see what you got on each assignment, you have to click on assignments. I know, it's weird, okay? And so you'll see all of these, okay? So then you can tell Jude got a 98 on his report. Here's his other grades. And so, yeah, in order to see all of the grades, you have to click on assignments. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Soon I will have grade reports for the whole semester, and I'll be sending those out, and they will have not only your grade for the whole semester, but they will also have these different things that I grade you on. Class participation, focus, submitting homework, attention to detail, following directions, and conscientious effort, MLA, structure and style, grammar, rules, and usage. So I'll give you a grade for each of those things, but that's not up there yet, okay? Now, the other thing you have to look at when you get ready to turn your assignment in next time, it says semester 1 here, and I don't know why it doesn't automatically switch when the date is reached that I put into the computer, but it doesn't. So when you get ready to submit your homework, you're going to have to go here and click on semester 2, okay? And you'll see that so far there's nothing showing up for semester 2 because we haven't done any papers yet, okay? So don't forget about that when you go to submit your homework. I know I'm going to get some emails from people saying, I'm not seeing any assignment. Let's talk about stories. I love stories. You can see I have a bookcases full of stories. That's just one of my sets of bookcases you can see there. Got a bunch more over here. I've got a bookcase in every room except for my kitchen and my laundry room and my bathrooms. So I got bookcases everywhere. And I love stories. And I used to really get frustrated when I was in school and we'd take a story and I felt like the teacher was just ruining it because we were picking it all to pieces and having to write about a bunch of gobbledygook, but I didn't think it mattered. I just wanted to read the story and enjoy it. Is there anybody who has experienced that and understands what I'm talking about?
Yes, ma'am.
So it wasn't until I met IEW and then Center for Lit that I started really liking story analysis. And story analysis, literary analysis is examining the different parts of what makes the story a story. And so I realized that I really did like it after all. It's kind of like a puzzle. It's kind of like a being a detective, figuring out why do I like this story? What is it that makes it so good, basically, okay? So let's talk about what makes a story a story. And we're going to look at pages, starting out, we're going to look at pages 38 through the next few pages, 38 through 40. We're going to talk about what makes a story, and then we're going to actually read a story, a very short story, and we're going to break it down into its parts. Okay, so on page 38, writing and analyzing fiction. We do 2 little stories in this class. Some of you are going to be frustrated because they're just 3-paragraph stories, okay? But the purpose of writing the 3-paragraph stories that we're going to write is to get in your head how stories are put together, okay? Thank you, Zoe. And once you understand how a story is put together by writing your own story, then you'll be able to understand and analyze other people's stories. So it's really fun. So let's look at page 38, the elements of literature. Now, I don't know if you all know where your bookmarks are. You remember these bookmarks that I sent when we first started class? These are this is kind of like a little cheat sheet, okay? If you keep this in the books that you're reading, then you'll be able to quickly remind yourself of the parts of a story. So what I've written in the handbook actually goes along with this. I made the bookmark first and then I rewrote my handbook. So, okay, so when we talk about the elements of literature, we're talking about 5 basic elements, and these are character, setting, conflict, plot, and theme. So let's talk about each of those. Everybody probably knows what the characters are in a story. What are characters? When we say the characters in a story, what are we talking about?
The people in the story?
Exactly. The people in the story. Now, they're not necessarily always people, are they? If you're reading science fiction, they may be some kind of alien or something, you know? But it's the people-ish kind of thing. And so I love how literature breaks down into these really neat groups of 5. So when we're talking about characters, the most important character in the story would be what we call the main character, or a special literature word. We call them the protagonist. And the protagonist is the main character of the story. And the protagonist always has a task to solve, which we're going to call the conflict. We'll talk about that in a minute. Sometimes we think of the protagonist as the hero of the story, but you can probably think of a book that you've read or a movie you've seen where the main character wasn't really heroic at all. Can anybody think of a story like that? Sometimes the protagonist can be a criminal. That's kind of a popular thing, you know, to have like a thief stealing the Hope Diamond or something like that. They're the main character, and you find yourself rooting for them, but they may not be a heroic person at all. So the protagonist is the main character, and then there's always going to be a person or a force of some kind that opposes the protagonist. And some of y'all know this word already without looking at my handbook. Who would we call? What would that person be called? Anybody know? No? Oh, come on. I know somebody knows this word.
Repeat what you said.
The person who opposes the protagonist.
Antagonist.
Antagonist. Exactly. So we might have Frodo in Lord of the Rings. I don't know how many people are Lord of the Rings fans. Anybody? Okay. Might have Frodo as the protagonist of Lord of the Rings, and then obviously there's going to be an antagonist trying to stop him. And there's quite a few actually in Lord of the Rings. Of course, the main real bad antagonist is Sauron, if you've read Lord of the Rings or watched the movies. And so then we might have some other supporting characters, especially with a really long book like Lord of the Rings. You're going to have quite another cast of characters. So these are some that I've identified. If you look on page 38, the loyal supporter or assistant. This is the person or being that comes alongside the protagonist to try to help them with whatever the problem is. Okay. Then I call the other one the henchman, and that's the one who tries to help the antagonist, right? And sometimes we'll even have what we call an ideal, which would be a person for whom the protagonist is performing consciously. For instance, sometimes in the King Arthur stories, Guinevere is the queen and Sir Lancelot is doing what he does for Guinevere. Gimli the dwarf in Lord of the Rings is performing for Lady Galadriel, and so on. So sometimes these people show up in the stories visibly, sometimes they don't. Let's see. Sometimes they're just kind of a shadowy force in the story. All right, so that's the characters. And the next thing we need to talk about is the second thing on your bookmark, and this is the setting. The setting is the world of the story. Every time you read a book, you can think about this as a little world that the author has created, okay? And so your job when you first start reading the book is to find out what you can about this world that the author has created. Does everybody in here have a favorite book of one kind or another? Can you all think of a favorite book? Okay, what's your favorite book, Connor?
Harry Potter.
Okay, now that's a definite world that the author created, right? You can think of that world. I can't remember what the name of that school is, but
Hogwarts.
oh, how did I forget that? Okay, Connor, Carson, what's yours?
The Narnia series, just like
Okay, and Narnia is a definite world that C.S.
Yes, ma'am.
Lewis created, right?
Mhm.
But sometimes these worlds function according to actual real life worlds, and sometimes they have their own rules, right? So Narnia is a great example of that. Grayson.
It'll probably be either The Old Man and the Sea or Finest Hours.
What's the second one?
Finest Hours.
Ooh,
It's just a rescue story, or it's a nonfiction rescue story from the Coast Guard.
oh my goodness. Yes. Well, and even though that's a true story, the author still has to create this world for you to see in order for you to be able to enjoy the story, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Old Man in the Sea. Wow. That's great that you read it already and you like it. It's a rough book. Let's see. I think I saw Zoe's hand up. Okay, Zoe, what's yours?
Not done reading the series, but so far I really like Harry Potter. My favorite book is Order of the Phoenix.
Is that a Harry Potter book?
It's the 5th book.
Okay. All right. So everybody has probably an idea of what I mean when I say that the author is creating this world, and that's what we call the setting. Okay. And the setting includes details such as when. It can include the time of day, the month, or the season. It could be a historical period. It could even be a fantasy time period, like Lord of the Rings is set in the third age of Middle Earth. Okay. And so another thing about the setting is it's where. Where does the story happen? And that can be a fantasy thing, or it can be a real world, like Old Man in the Sea happens, guess where?
In the sea.
Exactly. And it's a real sea, by the way they describe it, okay? But they will mention geography, as well as sights, sounds, smells, weather. Okay, so all that has to do with where the story takes place, okay? The atmosphere of a story is also part of the setting. Some stories you read and it seems really dark when you start reading it, right? It's gloomy. And if you ever saw the musical Oliver, the set for the musical is just depressing. It's all gray and brown and dull, and there's no happy colors or anything like that. So the mood of the story is also part of the setting. And then sometimes there are symbols that are really important and as part of the story. For instance, a symbol in Old Man in the Sea that sort of represents what's going on in this story, I guess, is that fish he tries to catch, or he does catch, but he wrestles it, right? So a symbol can be a part of the setting as well. Now, once we have the characters in the setting, now we're ready to talk about the conflict. The conflict is, listen to this, because I'm going to ask you this question repeatedly over the next several classes. The conflict is the most important part of the story. It's what actually drives the story. The conflict is the problem that the character has, the main character, that he tries to solve, okay? There are 5 different types of conflict. Some of you may have heard these before, okay? They all start with man versus something. And you know what? I don't care if that's what they call it in college anymore, but that's what it's called in this class, okay? And obviously when we say man, we could be talking about a woman. We could also be talking about a talking animal, all right? Or we could be talking about an alien, okay? It doesn't matter. It's all man versus something. So here they are.
Man versus man, man versus nature, man versus himself.
Yes, 2 more.
Man versus God and fate, and man versus various nature.
Yes, right. So man versus man, man versus self, man versus society, man versus nature, and man versus God or fate. You know, like the Greek myths all had a lot of man versus fate kind of conflicts in them, okay? Even though they were Greek gods that were having the problems. So those are what we call the conflicts. And the conflict is super important. If you don't have a good, strong conflict to drive the story. Oh, yes, Jackson, we're on page 39. If you don't have a good conflict to drive the story, that's where a story gets its energy. The story gets its energy from the conflict, okay? The next thing that's really important to talk about is the theme of the story. And the theme, actually, we'll skip that for a second. We'll go to the plot. Turn the page over. I think I did this. I think I put them in this order in the handbook because I didn't want to break up this page with the plot. So the plot is what happens in the story. And so it actually has, in a good story, it actually has a certain shape to it. Starts out low with low energy, and then it proceeds upward to meet the conflict, and then the tension gets higher and higher and higher and higher, right up to the very top where the problem is going to be solved, and we call that the climax. And then as soon as that problem is solved, either for good or for ill, then the energy starts falling out of the story, and the arc starts a downhill path. Okay, so if you look at my little schematic here on page 40, we're talking about 5 different plot stages. The first plot stage is what we call the exposition. And who in here has done drama before? Actually been on a stage in a play? Okay.
What kind of?
Sort of. Okay. Or you've probably at least been to see a play, right? And so when you're sitting in the audience, let's think about that. When you're sitting in the audience waiting for the play to start, the curtains open and you see the story world. You see where it's going to happen. Like in Oliver, it's really dingy and dull. Or if you're watching South Pacific, you see this beautiful island setting. Or if you're watching Phantom of the Opera, I think it starts out with an opera, if I'm not mistaken. Anybody seen Phantom of the Opera? No, kind of a popular one to go to. But you see where it happens. That's the setting. And they call those sets in drama. And you see the characters. You'll see people on the stage. Very rare would it be for a curtains to open and there's nobody on the stage, right? That would be kind of weird. So that's what the author is doing in what we call the exposition. The author opens the curtains, opens the door to the story world. He invites you in. He gives you details about the time and the place and some of the people in the story, a little bit about their situation. And he wants you to sort of get your bearings in the story world he has created before the next thing, which is he smacks you with the problem. That's what we call the conflict. So you see that in the second stage here. The conflict is introduced. The problem is introduced. The protagonist runs into a problem of some sort, which we call the conflict. The conflict causes what we call the rising action. The character starts thinking things and saying things and doing things in order to try to what?
The conclusion, or
tries to solve the conflict, right? And so this is then the antagonist tries to stop him. The antagonist might be a person, or it might just be a force. It might be a nature story. If any of you read Jack London stories, Call of the Wild, White Fang, those are nature stories. The conflict definitely is man versus nature, right? In Grayson, in The Old Man and the Sea.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So some force opposes the character to try to keep him from solving the problem. The tension gets higher and higher and higher until we reach the climax, which is the point of highest tension, the most exciting moment in a story. Movies have to have this, right? Everybody's waiting for that. Nobody would be happy if there wasn't some kind of climax in a movie, right? And so the protagonist is either going to succeed in solving the problem, or they're going to fail in solving the problem. Either way, the problem is finished. It's over with. Okay? I really like things where the protagonist succeeds. I don't like movies and books where the protagonist fails. That's a big letdown, isn't it? But in any case, whether the protagonist succeeds or fails, the problem is finished, and that's when all the energy starts going out of the story, and it starts on this downhill slope, okay? We get to the next stage, stage 4, that's the denouement. Can y'all say that with me?
The denouement.
Denouement. Yeah, it looks like denouement, but it isn't denouement because it's a French word, okay? So you can say denouement and sound very educated. I love that word. And you'll actually be using that word in some of the writing we'll do later on this semester. So the denouement, it's a French word meaning the unraveling or the unknotting, and it tells about what happens after the problem is over. Sometimes mysteries will be explained or misunderstandings will be cleared up, but it's kind of like what happened then. And in the conclusion, the story closes, things go back to normal, or in some way things have changed. If the characters have learned a lesson, this might be explained, okay? Now, if the author's a really nice author, they won't like have the problem end and then like, boom, just rudely drop you on the tarmac, okay? You want to have a nice, smooth landing where you're coming in and everything kind of gets wrapped up and there's a feeling of satisfaction of some sort, even if the protagonist didn't solve his problem, okay? So that's the 5 parts of the plot. And then underneath all of this, we have what we call the theme. If you look back on page 39, the theme of the story is the central idea or insight about the story. It shows what the author believes about human nature, life, a particular situation. There are a lot of stories that share the same thing. For instance, every Disney princess movie ever, it's either good versus evil or it's love, right? So, but there are a lot of other themes in stories. Alienation, ambition, authority, betrayal, clash of cultures. Anybody in here ever watched The Count of Monte Cristo? That's a great movie. Okay. And one of the main themes of that book and movie is revenge. Okay. And not much forgiveness in that story. I'm not sure about Harry Potter. I know there's a good versus evil strong theme in there. A lot of stories for young people are growing up, coming of age kind of themes. Okay. I don't read much young adult literature, but I happen to know that. Survival and resourcefulness is a big theme in a lot of stories. Okay. So the theme should just kind of rise naturally out of what the author has written. For instance, we read Christmas Day in the Morning at the last class, and the theme of that story is love, the nature of love, but the particular way of stating is love alone can waken love, which is what that old man realized when he was thinking about how he'd gone out to milk the cows for his dad and all of that stuff. So it's not always easy to figure out the theme, but you can do it if you think about it enough, okay? So what we're going to do now is actually break a story down into parts. I want you to look at page 43. The story outline that we're going to be using for the next 2 classes, this class and actually the next one, is going to be this one on page 43. Is everybody with me on page 43? So, we are going to be making keyword outlines for these, but they're going to be very different than the ones we made for writing a report. So when we're writing a report and we had a bunch of information to choose from, first of all, we had to decide what our topics were going to be. Sorry, I got a little choked on my tea. And then we had to decide what information we were going to use. How do we decide out of all that massive information that you had collected about your topics, how did you decide which information to write about?
Most interesting, most important.
Right. You had to ask yourself questions, right? What do I think is the most interesting? What do I think is the most important? Asking questions is how we think. If you think back to the very beginning of the year, we were asking certain questions when we were first making those really simple keyword outlines, and we were going sentence by sentence, and we would say, what are the 3 most important words in this sentence that's going to help me remember this fact? Remember that? So we think by asking ourselves questions. Sometimes we're asking them at such a deep level, we don't even know that we're asking questions, but we're constantly asking ourselves questions and answering them, and that's how we think, okay? So when we want to think about how to make a keyword outline for a story, we also have to ask ourselves questions. So here's a bunch of them that we're going to be asking. So look at page 43. We're going to have 3 paragraphs in these stories. The first one is going to be the exposition. And remember, the exposition is the part I told you about where the author opens the door to the story world. So even though with this first story, I'm going to give you a story to write, you're going to create the world. I'm not going to create it for you, okay? I will show you a story that I created from the little story I'm going to give you, but you're going to create your own story world. And here's some questions that you can ask yourself to come up with the answers for your keyword outline. First of all, what is the setting? Describe it. Where is it? When is it? What's the mood of the setting? Who are the characters? Give details about their behavior, their appearance, their personality, their background information. We're not going to talk about the conflict in this first paragraph. This first paragraph is just building a world. What's that computer game that so many people like to play that you build a world?
Minecraft?
Yeah, Minecraft, okay? So this is like story Minecraft, okay? You have to build a world. And I don't want to hear anything about any problems in this first, or the problem in this first paragraph, okay? When you get to the second paragraph, that's when you're going to spring the problem on your reader, okay? So the first thing is, that you must remember is you cannot have any rising action until you have the conflict. Sometimes when people start writing about the story that we're actually going to write about, starting in class 10, they'll get confused and they'll say something as rising action and then the conflict will show up somewhere later in the paragraph. It never happens that way. There's always a problem first, and then there's rising action. Does that make sense? The rising action is actually caused by trying to solve the problem. So one has to go first and the others follow, okay? So the first thing is, what is the conflict? I'm going to give you the conflict for the story we're writing this time. We discuss the conflict first and then the rising action. What does the protagonist do to solve the conflict? What does the antagonist do to try to stop him? What makes things more tense? That's what the second paragraph is about, okay? The third paragraph is about the climax, where the problem is going to get solved one way or the other. The denouement, the unraveling, the explanation of what happens after the problem is over. And then the conclusion. How do things go back to normal, or how have they changed, okay? Are things the same, or have they changed? How? Have the characters learned a lesson? What? What's the theme of the story? Okay, so that's basically the kind of outline we're going to be doing. So now we're going to actually do one together. Let's turn to the page in our handbook that we're going to actually use for this. Look at page 117 in your handbook. Here we have just the exact same keyword outline that I was talking to you about. And here's the little story that we're going to be using. And it's a very, very short little story because I didn't want to poison your mind with too much particular information. Okay? Now, this is not the same one we're going to be using for our homework, but we're going to practice on this one together, and then we'll be able to you'll be able to take these skills and use them for your homework, okay? So here's the first one. A hardworking farmer, stricken by a fatal illness, wished to be sure that his farm would continue to prosper and that his family would be taken care of. His sons were somewhat lazy, and he was afraid they would be careless in tending the land. He called them to his bedside and said, "My sons, there is a great treasure hid in one of my fields." The sons, after his death, took their spades and mattocks and carefully dug over every portion of the land. They were frustrated to find no treasure. However, because of their thorough plowing, the fields yielded an extraordinary and superabundant crop that year, and the family survived comfortably. Finally, the sons realized that the treasure their father had spoken about was really the fruit of their own labor. Okay, now on a scale of 1 to 10, how interesting would you think that story is? Yes, Levi. Oh, Jack?
5.
5. Okay. What's it missing that doesn't make it a really super interesting story?
A bad guy.
Rising action.
Rising action? There actually is some rising action in there, but what is it that makes it so? Huh?
The climax.
Yeah,
just
there's not really much of a climax, is there?
No,
I mean, there is one, but it's not real
A problem.
interesting. It's not really exciting, is it? So, what do we need to do to make this story more interesting?
add more details.
Ah, who said that? Okay, hold on just a minute. I am making a little form here that I can write on. Okay. Right. So, paste. All right. So, we need to add more details. That was a great thing to say. All right. So, what we're going to do is do just that. So, let's I want everybody to get a pen or a pencil or something you can write in your handbook. And we're just going to talk through this. Okay, share. All right. So, first thing we need to ask ourselves is, I don't seem to be able to move this. What's the setting of this story? Do we know what the setting is? Do they tell us what the setting is?
A farm.
Okay. All right, it's a farm. What kind of farm is it? Lots of different kinds of farms it could be. Then, does it tell us what kind of farm it is?
Well, it's for crops and fruit.
Yeah.
And
Okay, they've got some kind of crops. And so, I mean, it could be anything. Like, what kind of crops can you think of that might be interesting?
like corn, like vegetables.
Okay, it could be. It could be a pineapple farm in Hawaii. Or it could be an avocado farm in California. So the question is, what's the setting? Describe it. Who are the characters? All right, so the setting, let's go ahead and put this down here. Let's see. We don't exactly know, but that's what's so great about this story, because we get to decide, okay? And I actually did write a story from this, and I'm going to show you my story when we're done. Let me hide this floating meeting control here. I'll show you the story when we're done, because I don't want to poison your brain right now. So let me write on this. So we're just going to put basic things down right now. So it's a farm. What kind of farm is still to be decided? Describe it. Okay, who are the characters in this story?
The father and the sons.
Speak up.
The father and the sons and his
Okay,
sons.
we've got the farmer. We've got the sons. How many sons are there?
2.
Well, you know they've got to be at least 2 because it's plural, right? But it could be 3 or 10. I don't know. All right. Doesn't tell us. That's for us to decide. Okay, so tell me some things about the farmer. What do we know about him?
He's hardworking, it says, or
Hard working. Okay. Yes, hardworking. And okay, and we know that there's a problem here with him. This isn't the problem, but what's going on with him?
He is sick.
He's sick.
Yes, he's definitely sick. Okay. All right, now we know something about the sons too. For my purpose, I just sort of like the traditional story, so I'm going to have 3 of them. But there could be any number, couldn't there be? What do we know about the sons?
They're lazy.
They're lazy. Okay, now here's a question. Are they like really shiftless and they're just not ever going to amount to anything? Or are they just a little bit irresponsible and fun-loving? You can have up to 4 words, by the way, on this, just like you could when we did our reports, 4 words per outline point. Well, I'm just going to put quotation marks around this because these sons in here are they're just a little, they're good boys, okay? All right, I've decided this. They're a little irresponsible and they're a little fun-loving, but they're irresponsible and they like entertainment, okay? Let's see, wait a minute. Entertainment. Okay, they're entertainment focused. Okay, now I'll tell you what I wanted to do for this story. I love Italy, and I went to Italy in 2022, but I wrote this story a long time ago. So the farm that my story takes place on isn't exactly what you would call a farm. It's an Italian villa. And they have grapes. It's a vineyard, okay? It's very Italian, all right? So, it's actually in Tuscany, and it's a family estate. And right outside the villa is a little piece of the Roman road, if you know anything about Italy, okay? So I'm going to create this idea of Italy, all right? And so these boys, let's see, this farmer's name is Mario. That's very Italian, don't you think? And his sons are Luigi, Antonio, and I can't remember the third one. Marco. You know, like Marco Polo. Okay. So they really love going to the local coffee house, hanging out. Coffee house. They're not bad boys, okay? And Papa Mario is worried. All right? About the vineyard. All right. So I've created my world there. Sometimes boys in these stories are real villains, but mine are not, okay? They're really good boys. Okay. Anybody have any questions about that? Now, you might write this story, which you can if you want to, although it's not part of your homework. And you might have a completely different take on this. You could have a corn farm in Iowa. Somebody said corn. Who was that?
Oh, I did.
Okay. Or you could have, even change it a little bit, and you could have maybe a cow farm, right? You'd have to change it a little bit in order to be able to make that work, wouldn't you? This is the great thing about taking a story that's already been written and rewriting it. You can make it however you like. So now, so Papa Mario has to come up with a plan. Papa Mario plan. And he calls his sons in there and he tells them there's a great treasure hid in one of his fields. Okay? Sorry, this is probably scratchy and you can't see it. Papa Mario. Okay.
It's a me.
Huh?
Nothing.
Okay. So, sometimes people think the problem is that Papa Mario is worried or that Papa Mario has cancer. But that's not really the problem because he dies too early in the story. Okay? And so you can't have the person with the problem dying at the very beginning of it or there's no story left, right? Because after he dies, if that was the problem would be over with. He's not going to worry about it anymore. Okay? So there has to be a different problem here. And what is the problem? The problem has to do with the sons. And what do you think all of a sudden their problem is? I think they're surprised and delighted, and they want to do what? Anybody have a clue here what the sons want to do? What's their problem they're going to try to solve?
Find the treasure.
Find the treasure. That's the problem of the story. All of this other stuff up here is just setting up the problem. Okay? So then Papa Mario dies. Papa Mario dies. And my boys, since they are not villains, they are going to be very, what do you think? Think they're going to be happy? Yeah, they're going to grieve. They are going to grieve because they are not happy at all about this. They're just a little irresponsible. They're not villains. Okay? And so Papa Mario dies. The sons grieve. But after the period of mourning, they go out and they start hunting, right? Start looking for the treasure. Those are eyes. Digging. Okay. And they're going to dig all over the place. All summer. Okay. And they're going to get very strong and tan because they're going to be outside all day and there's not going to be any time to go to the coffee house. No coffee. No coffee house. Okay. All right. Can y'all read that enough to be able to jot it down? Yes? No? Maybe?
No.
I hope you're jotting this down. Okay, so here's Papa Mario plans treasure. Sons, they're surprised and delighted. Find treasure, that becomes their problem. Papa Mario dies, the sons grieve. They start looking for the treasure, digging all summer. They get strong, they get tan, and they don't go to the coffee house. Okay? What's opposing them? This is a group protagonist, I suppose. What is going to maybe prevent them from finding the treasure?
There is no treasure?
Well, that could be. What's their biggest problem that Papa Mario correctly identified?
They're lazy.
Yeah. So it's really a man versus himself, right? Also man versus nature, because they've got to dig all over that place to try to find the treasure. But they're really their biggest problem, right? Okay, are y'all ready for me to go on? Oops.
No.
No? Okay.
Mrs. Kimbrell, what time does class end? Because
11:30. 11:30.
Okay, because there's like tornado watches near our area, my friend has like a tornado watch on her, so I'm like,
Is this somebody in Augusta saying this? Is that Zoe I
yeah,
hear?
that's me. I
Yeah.
live in Augusta.
Yeah, I'm looking out the window right now. It looks pretty
Like
bad out
the
there.
thunder made my tabs fall down.
Yeah.
I know, I'm kind of in a room with no windows, so it's kind of.
Oh, well, I'm in a room with a window and a glass door.
Yeah, my friend lives in South Carolina, and there's like a tornado watch, and there's a storm chaser nearby. So she's like, "Well, that's not good news." And the clouds are moving really fast.
Well, yeah, I think I did read, now that you mentioned it, I read last night that we might have power outages. So if I suddenly disappear, that could be what
I might
happens.
disappear. If these lights turn off, then it's a power outage.
Okay. All right. So let's quickly do this, okay? Because I don't want to leave y'all hanging for your homework. Okay. So how does the climax begin? Well, in my story, they finish, finish. Why is this happening? They finish digging. No treasure. Okay? Sorry. My pen is really not working very well. They're mad. And they're disappointed. Okay? But all of a sudden, they get this huge crop. Okay? Sorry, y'all. I don't know why this isn't working. They get a huge crop, and they have to harvest it. This is grapes, of course. And it's the best ever. And they realize treasure is from their own hard work. Okay, now notice I'm not putting in every detail that I'm going to write for my story. I do want to have a basic idea of what happens in each paragraph. So they're going to celebrate. Celebrate.
Oh, there's the thunder.
Okay. I haven't heard any here yet, but it's raining like crazy. And the wind's really high.
Yes, I had to drive here.
There's like thunder every second for me.
I hope my surge protector really works. And so they're going to take care of the farm from then on. Take care of vineyard. Just like their father wanted them to. Sorry, let me try this again. Take care of vineyard.
Miss Kimbrell?
Yeah.
What was number 6 for the last one?
Celebrate. Sorry.
Celebrate. Okay.
Celebrate. Celebrate. And so this is take care of vineyard.
Okay.
Okay, it doesn't matter if you get down every single thing that I wrote. I want y'all to have an idea of how you do this, though. So let's look at the story that I wrote from this. And look on page, look on page 128. Now, if you write your story and you have dialogue, I don't mind you having a little bit of dialogue, but you cannot have more than 300 words per paragraph. And so there's just not room in a 3-paragraph story for a whole lot of dialogue, okay? I'm going to stop sharing for now. Let's see. All right, so let's look at this story. And this is the story that I came up with, okay? Notice there are 3 paragraphs, but the middle paragraph is split up a little bit because I've got some dialogue. And when you write dialogue, every time the speaker changes, you have to start a new paragraph, you indent. So if you use dialogue in your story, I never want anybody to ever do this except for this particular occasion. Put an extra double space between your paragraphs so I can tell where that broken up paragraph is. Okay? What page? 128. Okay. So here's my story that I wrote from Farmers and Sons. All right. In Tuscany, it's called a family tradition, and I got that from the last line of my story, just like we did for the reports, okay? In Tuscany, there once lived a hardworking farmer, Papa Mario, whose whole life had been spent tending the family vineyards. Here's my world that I'm creating. Like his father and his grandfather and his great-grandfather before him, he nurtured the vines, lovingly cultivating and weeding around them each year so they would flourish. It would never have occurred to him to leave his precious birthright in the care of a stranger. Accordingly, he led his family and hired hands in the gathering of the grapes. Oops, my battery's running low. Guess I'm going to have to plug it in. In the gathering of the grapes. It came to pass that 1 year after harvest time, the industrious man was stricken with cancer, and he sensed that he did not have much time left to live. He fretted about the future. Unfortunately, his sons were the heirs of their father's estate, but not of his conscientious character. All efforts to instill diligence in them seemed to have failed. The boys Antonio, Lorenzo, and Marco worked when prodded, but they never took any initiative. They much preferred the Italian custom of visiting the local coffee house and socializing with their friends. Because of the youth's carefree attitudes, Papa Mario feared after his death, his beloved family and vineyards would fall into ruin from their lack of attention. He greatly desired that the ancestral estate would continue to prosper and that his family would thrive. Soon, he devised a brilliant plan that would hopefully save both. Now, here's my second paragraph. This is where you get introduced to the conflict. Calling them to his bedside, Papa Mario murmured, "My sons, there is a great treasure hid in one of my vineyards." The sons glanced furtively at one another. Was the old man out of his head? Cautiously, Marco pressed him for details, but soon the patriarch dozed, unresponsive. When they could not elicit any further information, the boys slipped out of the room and huddled in the hallway, pondering the intriguing news. Antonio whispered, "Perhaps we will live the rest of our lives as wealthy nobles." "If so, the coffee house will be too common a place for such fine men," declared Lorenzo. "We will take apartments in Florence, Rome, Venice. Meanwhile, we can hire plenty of servants to tend our property in our absence. Such coarse industry does not suit gentlemen such as ourselves," sniffed Marco. Not long afterwards, Papa Mario died. His three sons grieved deeply, for although they were somewhat irresponsible and unmotivated, they loved and reverenced their papa. Nevertheless, after the period of mourning, they took their spades and mattocks and began cautiously to dig all around the vineyards, being careful not to disturb the vines. Day after day they searched. Their limbs ached by evening, for they were not accustomed to such continuous labor, yet they persisted. Their hands grew callous, and their skin glowed bronze from the long days laboring under the sun. As time slipped by, they grew steady and strong through their exertion. They rarely even thought of the coffee house, instead tumbling into bed exhausted each evening. Now, third paragraph, this is where the climax happens. Gradually, the grape leaves turned from green to gold, then to russet. Huge clusters of grapes sagged lusciously. The searing heat gave way to warm autumn days and cool nights. Suddenly, it was harvest time. Every inch of the soil in the family's vineyard had been turned, yet no treasure had been unearthed. The youths groaned and complained in their frustration as they faced the toil of their own harvest. "Where is our fortune?" grumbled Marco crossly. They had little time to contemplate their disappointment, as they were overcome by the immensity of the crop. Unexpectedly, because of their thorough cultivating, the vines yielded an extravagant quantity of grapes. They enjoyed their most profitable harvest ever. As they celebrated with family, neighbors, and workmen at their lavish harvest feast, Antonio, Lorenzo, and Marco at last realized that their treasure was the result of their own diligent labor. They chuckled sheepishly as they grasped how their clever papa had tricked them out of their laziness. Continuing the family tradition, the sons cared for the vineyards for the rest of their lives, just as Papa Mario had done. That's my farmer and son story. I like it. Okay. Now, another thing we want to talk about when we're writing about stories, is using descriptive language. And when we talk about descriptive language, we're talking about words that have that use the five senses. What are the five senses?
Taste, sight,
Sight, smell, hearing,
Sight, smell, hearing,
and
touch,
feel.
touch,
Touch.
and
taste.
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 Okay. And also, we're talking about words that indicate emotions. Okay, so let's look for some words. I know for sure. I went back and redid this story a few years ago because I realized I think writing descriptively is pretty hard. But I went back and redid this story. So let's look at the third paragraph on page 128, where it starts with gradually the leaves turned. Y'all see that sentence down there? What are some words that indicate things you can see or hear or feel? What about that first sentence? Gradually the grape leaves turn from green to gold, then to russet. Can you see those? Can you see those colors in your mind? Okay, those are descriptive sight words, and I've got a page full of color words for y'all. But put a box around or a circle around green, gold, and russet. Those are color words. Okay, huge clusters. I think huge clusters is pretty descriptive. Can you see that in your mind? Clusters of grapes. In the next sentence, the searing heat gave way to warm autumn days and cool nights. We actually consider these words touch words. A temperature word is a touch word. So what are some descriptive words in that sentence there?
Searing.
Searing is definitely one. Think about a steak on a grill. Okay. Warm, yes. Cool. All right. Now there's some emotion words. Actually, these are sound words here. Think about this. The youths groaned and complained in their frustration as they faced the toil of their own harvest. What kind of descriptive word would groaned be? What sense does that go with?
Here.
Oh, it's like, oh, okay. A circle groaned and a complaining sound. I think we all know what that sounds like, right? Complained. And then we've got grumbled right below that. Grumbled, Marco Crossley. Okay.
Is it okay if I circle that? Are we circling those?
Yeah, you can just circle them, box them, underline them, whatever works best for you.
Okay.
Okay. Look down at the last three from the bottom. There's a sound word there.
Diligent.
Diligent. Well, diligent is actually a quality adjective, but it's not really a descriptive adjective because it doesn't create a sound or a taste or a touch or a vision. Yes, Cadence.
Chuckle.
In Asia. Yes, chuckle. That's a word. Definitely a sound word. If you look up in the middle paragraph, the boys, when they're talking, there are plenty of sound words. In the very first sentence, calling them to his bedside, Papa Mario murmured, my sons, there's a great treasure hid in one of my vineyards. Murmured is a sound word. Circle that. Let's see. Huddled. The boy slipped out of the room and huddled in the hallway. Can you see that? That's a movement word. That's a sight word. Okay. So it's kind of confusing sometimes when I start asking people to use sense words to describe what they're trying to show. You want your reader to see what it is you're trying to show. Okay. If I really wanted to make some good description in my first paragraph, I would try to go back and rewrite some description of the villa and the vineyards at the very beginning, because I really don't have much description in that, okay? Let me show you these sight words, these description words that you're going to actually have as a word list. And if you look at page 79, they start on page 79. These are by no means all of the descriptive words that there are for each of these categories. This is just a bare sprinkling of available sounds, okay? There are human sounds. We could add murmuring to that. We could add grumbling. We could add yelling. Okay, so those are some sound words. There's human sounds, there's animal sounds, there's loud sounds, there are quiet sounds, there are musical kind of sounds. There are object and nature sounds. Turn the next page. Here's 2 pages of sight words. And sight, the sense of sight is broken down into some different categories. First, it's like what a surface might look like, okay? So a surface could be bumpy, or it could be cracked, or it could be fluffy. It could be steamy. You might be able to see these surfaces. I'm looking out at my deck right now, and what I see is that it's shiny and it's sort of flowy looking because there's rain falling on it, and it's sort of running across the deck and then down into the between the boards. Okay. Then we have bright light and color. We have reflection of light. Is something clear, or is it hazy, shiny, translucent? We have low light and low colors. Something can be dim or drab or dull or dingy, like the setting in Oliver. Movement words are also sight words because it's how you're looking at them. So I'm sitting here looking at my deck, and I see dripping, and I see flowing. Thankfully, it's not swirling on my deck. That would be really bad. That'd be pretty deep for it to be swirling. Shapes and lines are also sight words, but I love the color words on page 81. Okay. There's all the color words you could want. Now, those of you who are up on football, you probably know college football, at least in the South, there's a difference between Alabama red and Georgia red.
Yes.
Then there's Ferrari red, which is a totally different red. Okay. So when you tell your audience a color, you're putting a picture into their mind. And that's what all these descriptive words do. They're putting a picture, a sound, a smell, a taste, a touch or feeling into your audience's mind so they can see what you see. Okay? I think it's hard. Is there anybody who already does this and they really enjoy doing it? Oh, you do, Layla? Okay, you do, Aubrey. I think it's very challenging. It has not come easy for me. Touch words are on the next page, and then taste and smell are on the page after that. So touch words are, the sense of touch is strange. It can be how something feels when you touch it. It can also be pressure sensations, like a light touch on your arm, a crushing touch on your arm, which would be a totally different feeling, right? Cold sensations and heat sensations are also touch words. Air pressure, like breezy and blasting and blowing, which looks like we're headed toward blasting and blowing out there right now. Those are considered touch words. So, and then we have taste and smell. You'll find a lot of the same words for taste and smell on taste and smell, and that's because your sensation of taste and smell are very closely related. If you've ever had a cold and you haven't been able to taste anything or smell anything, you can see how closely related those are. I had a friend once who was born without the sense of smell, so he really didn't get what coffee was. And because he couldn't really smell, he didn't taste things very well either. So he was a very slim guy, and I guess it's because he wasn't tempted to eat by smelling and tasting food. So, all right, let's look on the composition checklist, and I'll show you where this appears on your composition checklist. If you look on page 212, this is the story composition checklist. And I need to talk to you in just a minute about the story you're going to be writing, but I want you to look at kind of down in the style element section. You see where it says new? I want you to include 5 of these descriptive words in each paragraph, and you're going to indicate them by putting them in italics and underlining them. Okay? Not bolded, but underlined in italics. Okay? If you bold them, then my eye's going to get confused when I start trying to grade your papers. All right? Because we bold and underline dress ups. Okay? So 5 of these per paragraph. And let's look at the story that we're actually going to be writing. Who in here has heard the story of the boy who cried wolf? Okay. That's a pretty common story. And I don't know if anybody in this class has read Little House in the Big Woods recently, but there is an actual boy who cried wolf story in there. Only it wasn't actually a wolf, it was Yellow Jackets. But it's a real thing that happens a lot in life, so it makes a great story. So if you look on page 162, here's the actual story that I'm giving you, and you can change this story, but you got to keep the main problems here. Okay. So let's look at this on 162 together, and we've got 4 minutes. All right. There was once a young boy who tended his sheep at the foot of a mountain near a dark forest. It was rather lonely for him, so he thought upon a plan by which he could get a little company and some excitement. He rushed down toward the village, calling out, "Wolf, wolf," and the villagers came out to meet him, and some of them stopped with him for a considerable time. This pleased the boy so much that a few days afterwards he tried the same trick, and again the villagers came to his help. But shortly after this, the wolf actually did come out from the forest and began to worry the sheep, and the boy, of course, cried out, "Wolf, wolf," still louder than before. But this time, the villagers, who had been fooled twice before, thought the boy was again deceiving them, and nobody stirred to come to his help. So the wolf made a good meal off the boy's flock, and when the boy complained, the wise men of the village said, "A liar will not be believed, even when he speaks the truth." Okay, without looking at the story chart that I gave you on the page before, who's the main character in this story?
Boy.
The boy. What's his problem?
He's crying.
He's a liar.
Well, that's ultimately his problem, but what's his problem that he's trying to solve in the story?
He's lonely.
Lonely and
Bored.
bored. Okay. Where do I want to see that problem show up?
The middle. The beginning.
The second paragraph. So I want everybody to take up your handy writing implement, and on page 162, I want you to write there, paragraph 2, plot stage 2, conflict rising action, lonely and bored. Okay? The question is, what is the conflict? The conflict is that he's lonely and bored. So do I want to hear anything about him being lonely and bored in the first paragraph?
No.
No.
Not one word. Okay? So what are you going to talk about in the first paragraph then?
Setting.
Exactly.
Characters.
Setting and characters. You're going to create a world. Why is this boy tending sheep all by himself? Where are his parents? Now, here's a little clue for you. It doesn't have to be a boy, and it doesn't necessarily have to be sheep. It doesn't necessarily have to be wolves. It could be a page who is going to be training to be a knight, and it could be a castle, and he could be made to stay there while the rest of the knights go off, and he's supposed to alert people if any giants come, and so he does it several times because he's bored. Right?
Any soul shadow.
Huh?
Any soul shadows.
Yes, yes. So it doesn't have to be a boy. It doesn't have to be a wolf. It doesn't have to be sheep. One time I had a fellow in one of the classes write The Wolf Who Cried Boy. You can change the main characters. You can change the setting. It doesn't have to be at the foot of the dark mountain, whatever. Let's look at the story chart that I've made for you on page 161, which is one page back. So this is what you're going to use to create your keyword outline, all right? Exposition, that's the first plot stage. Does everybody see on page 161? Mm-hmm. Details of character and setting. Who's the main character? Give him or her a name. I'll just be as bored as can be if you just keep calling this person the boy. Give him a name. Or give the girl a name. Or give the alien a name. Or whoever it is that you want to do, okay? What is his job? Where and when does the story happen? All right? I mean, it might be on Mars for all I know, right? You're not limited, okay? Then you get to the second paragraph. So-and-so, whoever he is or she is bored and lonely, decides to cry wolf or dragon or giant or alien or whatever. To relieve boredom and loneliness, people come, but they are mad when they realize it is a trick. Repeats this several times. Try to put a little excitement into it. Make it tense. You reach the third paragraph, climax. This time a real wolf, or whatever you decide it is, comes, but no one comes when he cries wolf. In the denouement, which is also the third paragraph, the flock is destroyed, but the shepherd escapes. Or the wolf eats the boy, or the wolf eats the flock and the boy, or they all escape with their skins, whatever you decide. And at the very end of the paragraph, the shepherd learns that lying could lead to trouble. If the shepherd is dead, then the other people learn it. Okay? It's up to you. So see the conflict down here at the bottom of the story chart. Will the shepherd be able to relieve his boredom and loneliness? And this is a man versus, I would say really it shouldn't be man versus man. It really should be man versus, what do you think?
Himself.
Yeah. He's his own worst problem, isn't he? He should have brought a book or a harp like King David did out on the hillside or something, right? Okay. Are there any questions about what you need to do for your homework? There are some examples of 3-paragraph stories in the handbook that you can read. You can be as creative as you like. Don't make your paragraphs more than 300 words, okay? It's already a very long story for 300 words. You will have all the dress-ups and all the sentence types, and now you'll have 5 descriptive words that you also mark, okay?
Yes.
Any questions? No? Okay. Well, I hope y'all have fun with this. Even though I'm not a story writer, I do think it's more fun than what you just had to do with research and all that. Yes, Asia.
We're supposed to start our book that we picked out.
Yes, that assignment will start in class 12. But if you haven't already started reading your book, you should go ahead and start reading it. So you're not ending up staying up till 3 o'clock in the morning the night before we start it.
I finished that book the day I got it.
What'd you get?
The sweep.
Oh my goodness. Did you love it?
Yeah, it was really good.
Oh my goodness. I love that book so much. Yes, Zoe.
In our stories, are we allowed to use the pronoun words like you and I?
Yes, yes. Oh, thank you for bringing that up. It flashed through my brain earlier and I forgot. Notice that the banned word list has changed. You may use all the pronouns you like. You may use contractions because it's a story. Okay. The only thing you have to avoid are these really boring adjectives and verbs. Okay. Those are still banned. You know, good, bad, big, little, said. Okay. Yes. Jack.
Can we use like don't?
Yes. Contractions. Yes, you may. This is a story. You can
Okay.
use this. You can use that in this assignment and in the next assignment. Then when we start doing our book review thing, you can't use them anymore because that is considered formal writing. But story writing is not considered formal writing. It's considered informal, creative, whatever. Okay? Good question for whoever said that. Thank you so much. Any other questions? No? Okay. This is really different than what we've done, isn't it?
Yes, ma'am.
So,
I'm excited.
huh?
I'm very excited.
Oh, good. Please make sure you read through the pages again and read some of the sample stories before you start writing, and you'll understand it better. Remember that you only remember about 10 to 50% of what you hear in a class, okay? So I do want you to go back and read what we've talked about today before you try to start with your writing. Cadence.
Do we have to do the works cited page?
No, there are 0 works cited pages for the rest of the year. That's the best part about the story section. No works cited. That's all. That's over and done with for the year. Good question. Okay. Any other questions? No? Okay. Well, I hope everybody stays safe. I know there's supposed to be like pretty wild weather across the whole country. I don't know about where y'all are. Andrews, is it bad out there where y'all are?
We're supposed to get like a huge snowstorm, but so that's coming through right now. So
Okay. And Lincoln,
Yeah.
I saw you nodding. You having weather up there too?
Yeah, the weather like a couple days ago says 100% chance of rain today. So
Okay.
hopefully we're gonna get snow too. We
Average
haven't got
forecast
snow.
in
I'm
Oregon.
sad about that.
In Oregon, what is it in Oregon?
Well, raining is like 100% chance of rain is normal in Oregon. So
Well, we're usually happy when it rains around here. It's just all this other stuff that they predicted to go along with the rain that we're not happy about. So,
Yes.
anyway.
I'm gliding down my
Very
street
much so.
right now.
Okay. Well, if y'all don't have any questions, then you can go. And please, since this is so different, I won't be surprised at all if people have questions and when they get started. So please, if you have a question, other people probably do too. Okay. So stay in touch. Let me know if you have problems. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank
Happy
you.
New Year,
Bye.
all.
Happy New Year.
Bye.
All right, thank you for
Bye-bye.
class.
Thank you.